You are listening to the Bitter Medicine Podcast on KWAC Radio. Welcome to the Bitter Medicine Podcast, where it's all about Black empowerment. Our show focuses on Black news and entertainment, arts, science, economics, history, people, and strategies that uplift, empower, and motivate Africans within the diaspora. And now, your host, whose favorite color is black, Goku.
Welcome back to the Bitter Medicine Podcast. This is your host, Koku. And tonight should be a good night. We have a show planned for you with a special guest. You've heard him here before. Tonight we want to discuss the FBI report about the BIE, the Black Identity Extremist. And our guest tonight recently posted a guest blog on the Bitter Medicine blogs site at www.bittermedicineblogs.com, discussing the 12-page report from the FBI on what they call Black Identity Extremists. So, before I go any further, let me introduce our guest. That's the brother Oni. Oni, you on the line?
Yes, sir.
Good to have you here today, Oni. As you know, we wanted you. You've really gone through and gone over this 12 or so page report from the FBI, and I wanted to talk to you a little bit more about the actual blog post that you made and your insight onto the topic. So, for you guys who are not old enough or who are not aware, the FBI has had a long history of aiming to thwart any kind of black progress. And back in the day, it was called COINTELPRO. You had a guy who headed the FBI and J. Edgar Hoover, who, for lack of a better word, had a hard-on for all black folks who wanted to stand up and push back against the system. Started with Marcus Garvey, extended through Martin Luther King Jr., who he hated extremely, and it also covered other folks like the movement in Philadelphia, Malcolm X, and others. So now recently the FBI had a report that, quote-unquote, leaked, identifying that there are more black extremists, identity extremists out here, something that the country needs to worry about since the murder of Mike Brown. Oni, I wanted to talk to you about a few things, so let's begin. First things first, Oni. Can you tell the listeners what is black sovereignty?
Okay, so black sovereignty is this idea that, this idea that black people are sovereign. You know, so it's like every people, every nation is sovereign in this world, where they're to be ruled by their own rules, their own laws, their own customs. But what happened with the idea of black sovereignty is that essentially the FBI is criminalizing even the idea of black sovereignty, as to say that white people are sovereign here in America. White people in England are sovereign in England, but black people here in America are not sovereign. They don't follow black laws. They follow white laws. They don't follow black customs. As far as white people are concerned, they follow white customs. And anytime they go against that right there, according to this document particularly, but definitely inside of the history of America, that right there is something to criminalize in black people.
So, over the years, if you're in any way a part of what's called a conscious community, you've heard people talk about achieving sovereignty and sovereign citizen status. Is that something you can really gain in America as a black person?
Well, in America, of course you could. You could gain anything you want, in a sense. But the reality is that these people, the American government, white people in particular, will fight against any of your gains. So if you're not willing to fight for what you need, right, then you're not going to get it.
Right.
They're not going to give it to you. They are going to resist you having that sovereignty.
Right.
Like that's for sure.
In your blog article, you speak a lot about the black warrior. Can you give the listeners an idea or a profile of what a black warrior really looks like?
Well, for me, it's a black warrior. A black warrior encompasses, what it means to be, in a sense, So really, truly, I realize that a lot of us don't know what it looks like to be a warrior, or to have a prosperous, independent African community, and that kind of brings me into like the first book that I wrote, which was called Zubiri and the Moons of Ma'ah, and that book pretty much gives you what it is to be a warrior, But it tells you, it shows you in the life of a man who's in his community, representing his culture, representing our culture, our ideology, our people. But in short, I think we could go to, like there's this Eurasian philosopher named St. Augustine, right? And he said something interesting, which was there can be war without peace, but there can't be peace without some kind of war, right? And so what he's saying is that the reality is that this right here, this situation that we're in, is the peace that the white man is fighting for, right? And so what a warrior is, in that regard, is someone who is, aiming to establish a peace that we would be fighting for. Say aiming to establish our sovereignty, if you will, our independent, prosperous, African communities. But a warrior, there's a lot, there's a lot of ways to interpret. There's a lot of ways to wage war. There's a lot of ways to, engage in quote unquote warfare. But the reality is that a warrior, in that sense, is to say a warrior, regardless, is at least establish an enemy. You have allies, and you have to engage allies with strategy.
Right. Yeah. So a lot of times you hear different folks, particularly from the conscious community, speaking of imprisoned men and calling them the black warrior class. Is that really the case? Because to me, most of our brothers who are in prison don't have an agenda against, the oppression. So are they included in what's called a black warrior, in your opinion?
Well, I believe it's Thomas Sankara who said, any soldier without a political education is a potential criminal. So, the reality is that a soldier or warrior would need a political, cultural, economical education. They would need some sort of ethical education, or upbringing, or some sort of ideology, in order to be effective in this war. Because like when you study warfare, because that's one thing that we don't learn. I have this one scholar would sometimes quote Elijah Muhammad for saying that there's three things that white people will never teach black people: is military science, is the science of business, and the science of mating, science of relationships. but the three sciences, but one of the sciences is obviously military science, and one of the things that, realistically speaking, we don't learn military science. Now, I mean, in some regards, we do practice, deception and deceptiveness and trying to win one over or whatever, or violence and all that stuff. We do practice that, in its rudimentary form, but the reality is that we're not studying it and no one's really teaching it to us,
Right.
But the thing with like one thing aside of military thought is the idea of a tactical retreat or even a feign, faking an attack, and the thing is that a lot of times, a lot of the brothers that are locked up, they are, they kind of, like, first, they didn't know who their enemy was a lot of times. I know people who were incarcerated and to a large degree, they were intimate, or close with white people, and it's the same white people who did them in.
Right.
So it's like, there's a lot. I wouldn't say that everyone incarcerated is a warrior. Certainly there are a lot of, political prisoners who were warriors, or certainly there are people who become imprisoned and then became politicized, but to say that, the dude who's, domestically abusing somebody or something, not necessarily a warrior per se.
Right. Okay. So, Oni, can you tell the listeners the titles of your two books again?
Oh, yeah. So that's Zuberi and the Maroons of Ma'ah at Compendium.
And the Pro-Black Compendium, right?
Yes, sir.
Yeah. Can you give us, what's the basic thesis of each of those titles?
Well, Zuberi, the Maroons of Ma'ah is about a strong brother in a powerful, prosperous, independent African community here in America. But it details how that could work, how that would operate, and what kind of mentality that a brother would have or would have to have in that environment.
Okay.
But whereas the Pro-Black Compendium is more like the book, the introductory text to Black knowledge.
Okay.
Because it gives you different venues to explore Black knowledge even further and deeper, but it also gives you a background or a backdrop for that exploration to be more effective. Because a lot of times you can't just open up Chancellor Williams' Destruction of Black Civilization and expect to get everything unless you know something going in, Right. Or you can't open up Blueprint for Black Power and expect to fully grasp it unless you know something going in, And so this book gives you a lot so that when you go, as you go and study and branch out and try to learn more, you have a lot already, and these come a lot simpler, a lot easier.
Right.
Than if you were to start off on it,
For those of you who are tuning in, Oni will be hosting his own podcast soon to come, where you could ask him anything. And I would suggest you guys take this opportunity to, once the show is launched, to actually ask him anything. There's a lot of knowledge in his two books that can be used as a blueprint towards fighting back. So let's return to this propaganda piece as I see it from the FBI, calling conscious warriors black identity extremists. This is a part of the propaganda machine. So what is the end goal of this propaganda from the FBI, in your opinion, Oni?
They are looking to criminalize Black consciousness, they are looking for a reason. They are giving law enforcement a heads up that it's okay to keep killing black people, and you're going to keep getting off from killing black people. But we're going to look into black people in black circles that may pose a threat to you, even if you continue to threaten and kill them.
So who specifically would be the targets of this propaganda? Like, what is the profile of the person who would be targeted under this BIE nonsense?
It's very see the document is, a lot of people are saying it's vague for that reason. Its target is essentially every black person who is unsettled by the quote unquote police brutality going on. So in essence, they are targeting all of us, and they are going to put more informants and more undercover agents amongst us.
Mm-hmm.
So that they can keep an eye on and keep us, from responding in any productive manner to the genocide that they're enacting against us.
So, two things you said there. You're definitely acknowledging that this is clearly towards an extermination, and you spoke about the turncoats or the sellouts, the informants. I want to come back to that in just a second, but before we touch on that, I want to ask you a very important question. Why is this article coming out now? You mentioned in the past it took decades. During your blog, I read where you said that, it took decades for documents like this to come out. And now here comes this document that explicitly says black people shouldn't have it. Then why is it that it's out now?
Yeah, and that right there is the question of the day, because, my gut instinct is, this guy Trump is pretty incompetent,
Mm-hmm.
and his administration, for lack of a better word, has had a lot of leaks, prematurely. A lot of people are just going against his government, for good reason. But and so that's the kind of analysis. But otherwise, to a large degree, it's like it doesn't. It's almost like anybody's guess is as good as mine. Because the reality is that sometimes a lot of people would like to attribute white people with some crazy gifted third sense two pieces two moves ahead of everybody else, but a lot of times they slip up, so it's almost like, why in the world would you put this document in the hands of black people?
Right.
Why in the world would you do that? And I can't see, because we go back to this war idea. One of the principles in warfare is that whatever benefits your enemy harms you, and whatever harms your enemy benefits you.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And of course, I keep that quote. That quote is inside of the Pro-Black Compendium. But what I'm saying is that this right here, giving black people this document harms them. So it really isn't, militaristically intelligent for them to let black people know about their thought processes, how they're looking at black people. Because remember, this is counterterrorism, right? How they're looking at black people and their process for investigating and their rudimentary thought on the whole process. So it's like, to me, it looks like a legitimate leak, but it's only a question of, how can white people be this silly, and why are they in control if they're this silly?
Right. That's a great question, and that brings me to this. Let's just pause for a second, and let's look at this thing historically. Okay. Discuss, if you can, the history of the FBI and black militancy. I spoke a little bit about it at the start, but I'd like to get your viewpoint on the history of the FBI versus black militancy. What are your thoughts?
So we come back to we're talking about the history of the FBI and black militancy. We have to start off with the FBI and Marcus Garvey, because the first black agent in the FBI was hired to infiltrate the UNIA, ACL, Marcus Garvey's organization, right? Because J. Edgar Hoover, as you pointed out, had something, for, us, black people, right?
Mm-hmm.
So black militancy, of course, to a large degree, the issue in America is for black people to be docile and under control of white people. I believe somebody wrote the Kerner Commission, and the Kerner Commission report. They're saying that black people, that essentially black youth are like they don't understand why black youth are so disappointed with the system as it is. When their parents seem to, almost not mind. And in fact, I think I could pull that one up, really quick.
Go for it.
Let me see. It says, they say a new mood has sprung up among Negroes, particularly among the young, in which self-esteem and enhanced racial pride are replacing apathy and submission to the system. The system, they say. So here's this government, 1968, writing that self-esteem and enhanced racial pride are replacing apathy and submission to the system.
Mm-hmm.
As in, this is the government. This is Lyndon B. Johnson's government, no less, saying that they want apathy and submission to the system rather than self-esteem and enhanced racial pride. Because you look back at Marcus Garvey, and he's about that self-esteem and enhanced racial pride. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And you look at, to a large extent, the trouble that America has, and this is actually pretty important too. When you talk about before the FBI, white people do not want black militancy, and they understand that self-esteem and enhanced racial pride are linked with militancy.
Right.
In the sense that there's this historian, I forget his name at the moment, but he was saying that one of the things that they did during our enslavement in America was they like essentially one I believe somebody like how the story goes, and whether the story is whether the story is 100% is not even relevant. But the way how the story goes is that, let's say there's a plantation here in America, and the black folk are always acting up, right? So then, but then there's a plantation, let's say in another country, let's say Brazil or something, right? And in Brazil, they're not acting up. So the plantation owners in America call up the plantation owners in Brazil, and call them over, and ask them to come and teach them what's going on with their, enslaved Africans. And I don't want to say slaves. I'll say enslaved Africans, right? And the let's say Brazilian enslavers are saying, well, when they come over, they say, well, what's going on? They look and they study and they say, there's your problem. And the Americans are like, now what's the problem? And so we're telling our kids who we were where we were from, what we were, how much better we had it, how much better our civilization was. And we're telling our kids all of that. And of course, if you're in a situation of depravity, of scarcity, of poverty, but that your history is from, riches, from, extravagance, from defending yourself, from militancy, right? Then of course you're going to be militant, So the Brazilian enslaver is like, now you got to stop teaching these kids. You got to stop letting them teach themselves this, one. And two, you got to stop having these families be connected.
Right.
Put people of rival groups, if you will. Tell them they're rival groups. It doesn't matter, right? But give them another spirituality. Give them a spirituality of submission. Give them give them anything. No, don't let them remember their sovereignty. Don't let them know their history. Let them understand submission, right? Let them think that you are helping them. Let them, all of that. And in no time, of course, we stop handing down our traditions because, first off, how are you even going to hand down your traditions if they take your kids from you?
Right.
You see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
If they break apart, like if you have a child and you want to tell them about your grandfather and your grandmother, but your child is on the other side of America, and you don't see them for the rest of your life, that's it.
Mm-hmm.
And sure, you could tell some other kid your story, but it's not something to pass down. You get what I'm saying? So It's like they part of the breaking apart the family, part of hiding the history, part of that, all of that is to hide. All of that is to prevent black militancy, and the FBI what it does is it says to itself, that like if one thing you could pick up on, and particularly the Black conscious movement of today, is that today we're not necessarily focused on any particular group in our history to a large extent,
right?
And so what worked before was, hey, we're going to take away your particular group. Now you can't say anything about your particular group. You can't say what your history was. You can't. You don't have. But of course, even back then, even back during our enslavement, just be African.
Mm-hmm. So, Oni, in your blog post, you begin to speak a lot about the invasion of privacy. I'm going to take a quick station break, and on the other end, we're going to discuss the issue of the invasion of privacy of black conscious people.
You are listening to the Bitter Medicine Podcast on KWAC Radio.
Welcome back to the Bitter Medicine Podcast. We're having a discussion with a special guest today, Oni. Oni recently wrote a blog discussing the 12-page memo of the FBI that was leaked concerning the black identity extremist. We're right now about to discuss the fact that the government, the FBI, is invading the privacy of black folks to keep us oppressed. Oni, are you there?
No, I mean, this is it. The reality is this, that, like I said, they don't treat us like a sovereign people.
Right.
And in reality, and the thing is this too. On the one hand, it's like it's not for them to treat you like a sovereign people. You have to make people treat you with sovereignty. Respect your sovereignty.
Right.
And the reality is that unless you can make people respect your sovereignty, they won't. But here's what it is. It's like they have sovereignty. They have privacy. They have sovereignty. They have They have all that, and we don't. You know, so one example, of course, would be, you know, they do the investigation on you. You don't do the investigation of them. You
Exactly.
know,
Yeah.
they go through your social media. They get your private messages on your email, on your computer, on your laptop. You know, they do all that to you. You don't do that to them.
Right.
You know, because at the end of the day, they're saying you are their property.
Mm.
You see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Because the reality is this, that, like, for instance, you know, a lot of, like, few people can go up to his computer, take it, look through it, and copy any information they want, and you know, talk to all their friends, nobody, few people could do that.
Mm-hmm.
But white people said, hey, look, I can't. And it's like, who says you could?
Right.
I did. You see what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
And I could do it to you, and I could do it to anybody who I feel like it, because I decide the rules. You know?
Yes.
But it's like that right there is disregarding, disrespecting your privacy, your property. But it's like, yeah, well, to them, it's because you're their property. You see what I'm saying?
It's kind of like the saying that has become popular lately, I'm white and I say so. That's kind of how the government and white folks kind of act. It's not about what you say, it's about what we say, and it's because we're white. That brings me to the topic of white privilege. In your article, you speak about white privilege and the monopoly of lawful violence. Can you unpack that just a little bit for me?
Yeah, I don't use the term white privilege because I know it's just white people practicing nationalism. You know, and they're practicing nationalism on a population of black people that are not practicing nationalism.
Right.
So what we call white privilege is just white people practicing nationhood as they're supposed to. You know, they're supposed to treat their nationals better than they treat other nationals. You know, like Germany is supposed to treat Germans better than it treats the British. You know, Kenyans are supposed to treat, Kenyans supposed to treat Kenyans better than they treat, Slovenians or whatever.
Right.
You know, any nation is supposed to treat their people better than they treat another people. But what America is saying is that you're not one of their people. You see, and black people don't, like, we tend to, think otherwise, because they say something like African American, right? We believe, oh, that means that we Americans. No, it means that you are, it means that they see you as the property of Americans.
Right.
But you're not an American. You understand?
Yes.
And so I don't use the term privilege. So when they talk about lawful violence, they're saying that they have a monopoly on violence because as a nation, they can practice violence, but you, as a non-national, as property, can't practice violence unless it's the violence that they want you to practice.
Right.
So they're okay with you practicing violence against other black people.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
But the moment you start practicing violence against their citizens, their nationals, their nation,
yeah, then
there's a problem. Then it's not lawful anymore.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? But them practicing violence against you, that's perfectly fine. It's like if you slap your dog, that's fine. It's your dog. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
It's your property. If you throw your couch out the window, it's your property. You know?
Mm-hmm.
If you burn the pancakes in the morning, that's your property.
Mm-hmm.
You know? But so for them, it's like, yeah, if whatever we do to these black folk, that's fine. They're our property. But the moment a black person does something to them, that's where the problem is.
Right.
So they have a monopoly on violence, and it's like, and we gotta see too, because when I say that there was only 6 incidents in this document. You know, we have to realize that one of these incidents was just a brother purchasing explosives. That's all. Meanwhile, you had that Las Vegas incident, right, where this dude hauls in over 20 guns, into a hotel room, and the reality is this: that if you ask hotel workers, what they will tell, like the cleaners, right, what they will tell you is that they find guns in hotels all the time. You know what I'm saying? All the time. White people always traveling with guns, hiding them under the bed, all that. So it's to say that, this brother got in trouble for just purchasing explosives. And that's one of the 6 incidents that they're looking into to call you a terrorist. But as I stated, numerous times, 100 mass shootings in America in the last 400 days. Not just shootings, mass shootings in the last 400 days. That's more than one mass shooting a day on some circumstances. And on certain days. And what that tells you is that, but they're not opening opening a terrorist file for that. They're saying over the course of 2 years, there was 6 unrelated incidents. We're going to try to see what's the relationship and how can we prevent it, because we expect more, because we understand for law enforcement will kill more black people and get off with it more often, because again, they have the right to do so. You know what I'm saying? Because you're their property. So, according to them. So they have the right to kill you, but you shouldn't do anything about it. And if you even do 6 things in 2 years, one of them is just purchasing explosives. That's all. Yeah, that's too much. Exactly, that's too much. Meanwhile, if you're a white man, you could buy you could bring 23 guns up into a hotel and shoot up a concert. But they're not opening up any files for counterterrorism on you. Right. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah. So, in your article, there was a line that I absolutely loved. I loved it so much that I quoted you as a status in the Bitter Medicine Podcast Facebook page. The line goes, white folks will not further black dreams. And I thought that was so poignant because a lot of us look to and are always pleading with white folks to step in and help us achieve equality, help us to get up from underneath oppression. But white folks really and truly will not help us in those respects, because that would, in their minds at least, threaten their standing. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, and that is a good thing that you asked me that question, because people need to read this. People should read this FBI document themselves and see exactly what what the FBI is saying that black people are looking for. And when you look at that, you'll see that them saying otherwise, right, is almost, it's almost ridiculous, right? So this is what they write about FBI. I mean, about the black identity extremists. They say individuals who seek wholly or partly, let's say through unlawful acts of force or violence, whatever, in response to perceived racism and injustice, and some do so, and this is what it is right here. Some do so in furtherance of establishing a separate black homeland or autonomous black social institutions, communities, or governing organizations within the United States. The desire for physical or psychological separation is typically based on either religious or political beliefs. It is sometimes formed around or includes a belief in racial superiority or supremacy. And they're saying the mere advocacy is it may be constitutionally protected. That right there is a question mark. But the big thing here is that they understand that there is a population of black people who are just interested in establishing black homeland or autonomous black social institutions, communities, or governing organizations within the United States, right? And very few people would say, oh, wait, an autonomous black social institutions? What's wrong with that?
Right.
And very few people would say there's something wrong with autonomous black social institutions or autonomous black communities or autonomous black governing organizations. But here you have the U.S. government on paper telling you that there's something wrong with that. That it might be okay to advocate for it. But the reality is that right there, just the idea, just the reality that they know that that's what you're looking for, right? That's what you want, right? The government knows this, but instead of saying, hey, this might be reasonable, this is something that we could do, we could work with this, this is a way to work. No, they're saying they're not going to get it, and they're going to try to get it, and that's why we're here to stop that.
Right.
You see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Because it's not like because see, a lot of times you know a lot of us are under the impression that maybe they don't know what we want. You know, maybe we need to go out there, you know, and speak to them, and then and show them how reasonable it might be or reasonable it is, and in that regard, then they might turn around and be like, you know what, that's not even a bad idea. Autonomous black community, that's not a bad idea. But they're not saying that. They're saying we know they want autonomous black social institutions, autonomous black communities, autonomous black governing organizations. We know that. But despite but that's it. We know it. But we're not going to do anything. We're not going to act on that. You see what I'm saying? We're not going to act on that. We don't have anybody working toward that. We just know that that's what they say they want, but that's it. You get what I'm saying? It's like because you would think that they don't know that the way how they act, the way how they pretend, the way how they interact with you would think they don't know, but clearly they know.
Yeah.
And it's them knowing, and because you have to, it's like a proverb, and like I said, my book, I have a lot of proverbs in it. So it's like one of the proverbs goes, like you judge people by their deeds. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Quality. It says qualities of a moral order are measured by deeds. So you can tell how moral somebody is or moral something is by its deeds. Yeah. And here you have these people cognizant of of something so simple as autonomous black social institutions, which could basically mean an independent black school. You know what I'm saying? That's all it could mean. It could mean an independent black school. It could mean an independent black place for spirituality, for worship, or whatever. It could be a independent, black dance or sporting anything.
Yeah.
They know this, but their deeds show otherwise because this is a counterterrorism document. This is the criminalization of black people for something as simple as desiring black social institutions and communities. So it's like, yeah, they're not your dreams, they're not looking to further them. No.
So
they know what you're dreaming, and they're not worried about that. They're worried about you being under their control, under their white social institutions, white communities, white governing organizations, white homeland. That's it.
So that brings me to a thought. So this podcast is a dream too. This podcast is a dream for Black nationalism. Right now, it's a part of free speech, but that could change, can't it? I mean, based on this document from the FBI about the BIE, a podcast like mine's could be viewed as something worthy for them to go after, if not now, eventually, right?
Exactly. You know, the FBI, a lot of times, one of my friends was telling me how, you know, he was posting some stuff online or whatever, and then eventually someday, you know, one day, the law enforcement agencies kicked down his door and start talking to him, you know, start telling them, cut that out.
Really?
Cut it out. Yeah. And not just that, but then, you know, even like, you know, regular plain old Black Lives Matter people, you know, get home visits.
Yeah.
You know? So a lot of times, yeah, you know, they put us on lists. You know, they are looking for us. You know, they're looking for any, you know, because there's a lot of times. You know, there was this one sister on YouTube who was, you know, she was, you know, outright advocating, you know, all sorts of stuff. But they went to, they arrested her. And then they gave her a bunch of trumped up charges about sexually abusing kids and whatnot. And she's surprised, she's as surprised as anybody about all these charges, but that's what they do.
Mm-hmm.
You get what I'm saying? That's what they do.
Yeah.
And so it's only, you know, it's like, yeah, you know, you have free speech. I mean, you know, it's like how Amos Wilson said. Amos Wilson said, you know, why is it that black people say that they're free? And yet everything that they're free to do is what the white man wants them to do. Everything that they want to do enriches the white man.
Mm-hmm.
You know? And so it's like when it doesn't enrich the white man, right? When it's not what the white man desires, then no, you're not free to do it. Because again, he sees you as property. So yeah, you have free, you know, I believe it was a quote from The Miseducation of the Negro by
Carter Wilson.
Yeah, Carter G. Woodson, right?
Yeah.
He says that, you know, if you miseducate somebody, you know, this is paraphrased. If you miseducate somebody, you don't have to tell them to go to the back door. They'll go on their own, and if there isn't a back door, they'll make it for themselves. and here, and that's the issue that we have as a people, where it's like we have quote unquote free speech, but if you look at how we speak and what we speak about, that right there is, you know, in that whole avenue, we're speaking about, you know, self-destruction pretty much.
Right.
You know, or we're speaking about nothing. You know, we're speaking about, you know, the latest comedy, the latest, you know, everything that they tell us to speak about pretty much.
Mm-hmm.
You know? But so, yeah, this speech right here, it could get you in trouble. You know? You know, anything that white people don't approve of can get you in trouble. Matter of fact, you know, I mean, it's a little too early for me to talk about this right now, but a brother just talked to me about, you know, some situation he's having at just something as small as the parent-teacher conference,
mm-hmm.
where he's asking questions, okay? Where he's asking questions about where's the results of the system, of, you know, of like basically, you know, the school's getting state money, and he's saying, where's the results of it? You know, where's the results? Why is it that you know, the kids aren't doing better? And just saying that, the school is trying to, you know, put him away. You get what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Just saying that. So it's like, you know, and of course, you know, I shouldn't be speaking about it, but the reality is, that's where we live in. That's what we live in. Where, yeah, if you go to the parent-teacher conference and you just say, and you just, you know, yap away and say, yes, y'all doing a good job, and yes, and oh man, my kid is bad. That's what they want you to say. That's what they tell you to say.
Mm-hmm.
But the moment you say, well, if you getting so many $100,000 from the school for our kids, then our kids should be doing very well in this system.
Yes.
And our kids aren't. So can you answer to that? And they're like, you know what? You need to get out.
Yeah.
Get lost. because you asking us about what we doing. You need to get out. You causing trouble. You know what I'm saying? It's and that's as old as the plantation system.
Yeah, the uppity Negro.
Exactly. That's as old as the plantation. Because even Frederick Douglass was told, you need to get out.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
You talking all this stuff. You need to get out because our people are happy. You know what I'm saying? Our people are satisfied.
Yeah.
You go to the parent-teacher conference. The parents are satisfied. Because I remember sitting down with my parents. Matter of fact,
Mm-hmm.
and I mean, in some subjects I wasn't doing all that great.
Mm-hmm.
Or in some subjects, or in some subjects, teachers wanted to hold me back, and my own parents were like, okay, if you need to hold back, well, they didn't hold me back, but they're like, if you need to give them a bad grade, give them a bad grade,
right?
You know what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
But I remember, but other, I mean, sometimes, you have parents who are like, look, you better give my kid, you know what I'm saying? Like parents who advocate for their kids. And then there are parents who even go further and advocate for all the kids.
Right.
And when they advocate for all the kids, okay, something's wrong.
Mm-hmm.
You got to get this person out.
Mm-hmm.
And not to tangent off into that, but it's just saying that it's going on in every avenue where it's like, yeah, if you are going against, if you're not talking about how happy you are, like back to the Kerner report. You're not talking about how happy you are, how submissive you are to the system. If you're not talking about being apathetic and dealing with apathetic things like getting new shoes or the latest comedy or watching Empire or whatever. If you're not doing that and you're doing a little bit more, you suddenly a problem. And a lot of those political prisoners that we talk about, a lot of them are just people advocating for black people. When we're clearly being done a raw injustice.
Yes.
Yeah. A lot of times. So yeah, this is, because that's what I'm saying. Like yeah. So and the thing is this: they're not going to tell you it's not free speech. You get what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
I'm telling you that I remember reading about because sometimes if you want to look up into how you're going to write a political prisoner, you can read their stories. I remember one sister who was a political prisoner. I can't remember her name, but the reason why she's a political prisoner is for like I said, she was trying to advocate for the school system. Like she was trying to teach her students, like self-respect, self-esteem, that kind of stuff. And she's locked up.
So anything that's about positive movements or upward movements is seen as an enemy of the state. Only let's take a quick station ID break and we'll come back. I have more questions for you.
You are listening to the Bitter Medicine Podcast on KWAC Radio.
We are here today talking to Oni about his recent blog article on www.bittermedicineblogs.com concerning the FBI report, the 12 or so page report about black identity extremists. Oni, I don't know if you personally identify as a Moor, but there are groups of black folks out here who identify as Moors and who talk all the time about being able to buy your sovereign status, etc. And the FBI report touched on these groups, and they mentioned things like fraudulent claims and stuff like that. What's your knowledge of the Moors, and on top of that, what's your message to the Moors concerning this BIE file that was leaked?
Well, Marcus Garvey was like one of the best organizers of African people, post Ma'afa. And one of the things that he said was the only protection against injustice in man is power, financial and scientific. And with that issue, we have to understand power comes in the power comes in organization and nationhood and that sort of stuff. So regarding that, it's like the FBI was saying, you know, like the FBI said, America itself is saying, we don't recognize any such sovereignty that these Moors are, that these people, you know, who call themselves Moors are claiming. You know what I'm saying? Now the Moors are saying that you know, America recognizes its sovereignty.
Mm-hmm.
You know, but the reality is no. You know, America doesn't. You know what I'm saying? Because they're not going to recognize you unless you have power,
right?
Unless you have nationhood. You know, and so a lot like I think some of us are familiar with some videos of Moors using, you know, legal, you know, lingo to escape, you know, escape, you know, the low class police, and sure, you know, Asada Shakur in her autobiography, you know, shows an example of how you can trick white people, you know, albeit temporarily, into respecting you. You know? Like in the example of Asada Shakur, for instance, she points out that she wanted to go to a theme park, but they wasn't gonna let no black people in the theme park. But her mother said, "Look, if you want to really go to this theme park, I can get you into the theme park, but just I just don't talk about something like that." But basically, her mother goes up to the theme park person and starts speaking in Spanish, you know, and kind of fakes that she's like from another country, like from like, you know, like from a Spanish speaking country, right? And because these white folk in the South don't think, you know, don't think black people can speak any other language but, you know, English or whatever, right? They let, you know, this outside national, you know, have the quote unquote white privilege, if you will, you know, but really just get that nation status, you know, because they're not going to treat you like you're their property if you were another national. So not in that particular time. So it's like with the Moors, what I could pick up on them is that they say that they're another national, kind of like Asada Shakur's mother saying that she's, you know, another national,
right?
You know, and so in that way you could trick some white people, sure. You know, you say that you from Mauritania, you know, or you a dignitary from Saudi Arabia or some crap, you know, then sure, you know, somebody might, you know, some white person might be like, okay, that's possible. You know, I mean, especially if they're ignorant, you know, of course, and a lot of white people are ignorant, sure. But the reality is that it's you know, as they said, it's fraudulent because for one, you're not, you know, for one, you're not practicing power. You see what I'm saying? You know, you don't have any power, and then two, you're relying on a person to be ignorant, sure, but you know that's not any protection for you because the reality is that, or said differently, one of my friends was letting me know that you know one of these brothers who talk about all this sovereignty kind of thing was recently, you know, arrested and abused and beat up, and his wife was, you know, all sorts of stuff, you know, and that's after he's all talking all this, you know, nationhood or even, as some people are saying, that he started talking about, you know, white people might be all right, all that kind of stuff. But it's like that's what happens to us, you know. The more thing is a distraction, you know. Realistically speaking, it's like, you know, one of the first conscious quotes I heard was Malcolm X saying, you know, what do you call a black person with a PhD? You know, a nigger. You know,
yeah.
And the thing is that's what, you know, that's where we, you know, unless we practice Black nationalism, right? Unless we get Black nation, unless we get power, unless we get Black organization, right? Unless we do that, unless we get Black knowledge, you know, the reality is that we are just, to them, we're just their property, and to a large degree that you know, oh, I'm from Mauritania, you know, it's not going to work, you know. What Asada Shakur's mother did before wouldn't work today. You know, because whether you Spanish speaking or not, you know, they done went to whatever country she might have said she was, and they're like, well, you just an N-word there too.
Right.
You get what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
And whether you a Mauritania, you use the N-word there too. You see what I'm saying? So it's like, no. I mean, I don't encourage anybody to buy into this more thing, but as the FBI points out, there's something good about understanding sovereignty. You know, the only trouble is that the Moors are not a real identity, a real that black people here in America, can adopt. But that does segue into who the Moors were as a historical people, and that's something that a lot of us are not really mindful of. That the Moors are a historical population of Africans, but also Arabs who colonized Southern Europe for over 700 years.
Right.
Mm-hmm. And in that colonization, but like I point out to some people, who commented, who asked me about this, this issue, that colonization process was something that white people, have in their minds about us as a people, so whereas the Africans here in America are not the historic Moors to any large degree or any significant degree, but at the same time, the historic Moors were a people of concern and for early white people here in America.
It reminds me of the sister Corinne Gaines. Remember Corinne Gaines? She was killed by the police. I think it was in Baltimore. She was shot in front of her son. In fact, her little son, I think, was 5. He was actually shot by the police as well. And she had done these videos during a traffic stop. And she was explaining to the police officer at the time that she was a free traveler. And the Moors, they refer to themselves as free travelers oftentimes. And the belief at the time from a lot of people was that her having that Moorish ideology kind of got her killed, because at the end of the day, these white folks don't care about your so-called Moorish status. So I agree with you. I think it is a large distraction for a subgroup of the conscious black community, this idea of status. And when I read it in the report, I kind of did agree as well with the report, actually, that a lot of it is fraudulent, because we see a lot of people out here claiming that if you give them X amount of money, they could get you your sovereign status. And it seems to me, and from what you're saying as well, that so-called sovereign status doesn't amount to anything. It doesn't protect you from anything.
No, because like I said, the brother who, like, cause I was just looking into it. I didn't look too deeply into it because I don't really follow this particular brother, but brother Polite, was arrested.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. But meanwhile, he's saying, arrested, abused, beat up. His wife, or one of his wives was also, all that, But meanwhile, so it's like if you were quote unquote sovereign, when you had that sovereignty, or you were your own nation, as I heard somebody say, he said of himself,
Yeah.
Then they wouldn't do that to you.
Right.
Because they don't do that to Germans.
Right.
You understand? They don't do that to Chinese.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I'm saying? They don't do that to people with real nation status. Right? So the thing is that if you're doing this more thing, and you're doing it to separate from other black people, right? Mm-hmm. Then you don't weaken yourself for no reason.
Right.
How is that? No one's respecting you. Like if you're looking for white people to respect you off of that, you're sorely mistaken. Because Marcus Garvey already said the only protection against injustice in man is power. physical, financial, and scientific. So, and that's the trouble that I have with these wars, or even the Israelites, or any of those kind of movements, is that they are saying that they're different from their brothers and sisters,
right?
You know, and in that different, or even they saying that they already solved it. They done solved the case.
Mm-hmm.
You know, they're already free. You know, they're already a separate people. They're already, sovereign, right? And it's like, no, you didn't do enough.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I'm saying? And there's no such thing as a person who's free by themselves.
Right.
You know what I'm saying?
Yes, absolutely.
So it's like, so to me, it's like, yeah, obviously you do want our people to have a mentality of sovereignty, right? But you don't want our people to have a mentality of, oh, well, I'm different from I'm different from you, and I'm already free. You know what I'm saying? Because the thing is that whether you are more or you not, a lot of black people seem to think that they already free, and that right there is one of the bigger troubles amongst our people, because if you already free, you ain't got nothing else to do, and the reality is that you got so much more to do, and you sure ain't free.
So.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, so let's just switch gears for a brief second. In the report, they speak or they reference the killing of Mike Brown several times. Now, police have been killing unarmed black men for decades. Why is it they use the Mike Brown incident as the jumping off point for their so-called black identity extremists?
So from what I could gather from this document is that they're just trying to find a link between these 6 incidents. And the thing is that these 6 incidents are unrelated. Okay? But they're just trying to find a link. So they're saying chronologically, basically, the trouble, the thing that's the most unsettling thing about this document is just how incompetent this FBI is. Yet they're still in control. They're still in power. And that right there should be a national embarrassment of black people.
Yeah.
Just this idea that there are these so-called, what we tend to say is like some omniscient, extremely powerful, agency that's subverting black activity and black, communities and all that. But then you look at how they're thinking, and it's like, are you serious? Because anybody in the black conscious community can tell you this is unrelated.
Right.
These 6 incidents are unrelated. But these white folk are so disconnected and dumb, right, that they're like, you know what, we're going to look for some connection. We think we found a connection. They're saying they are 80 to 95% sure that there's a connection. Meanwhile, when you look at the incidents, anybody could tell you that there isn't. Anybody is a no. In fact, I'm a little embarrassed to even say it, but that's the situation that we're in. To me, it's just embarrassing, this idea that they seem to think that this Mike Brown incident, but to touch on that though, what they are pointing out is that there were 6 incidents that were premeditatively targeting police. Meanwhile, they're saying that black folk before the Mike Brown situation, right, weren't premeditatively attacking the police.
Mm-hmm.
You get what I'm saying?
Right.
And that the violence that black people used to have was more so during the 60s, right? And it kind of died down for 20 years. So what they're saying is, from the 80s and forward, right? But what they're saying is not so much that what they're really saying is black folk are starting to be a little bit more militant, and they're also being a little bit more premeditated against the police, right? That said, right, they're trying to find a connection with it, because they're like, why is it that black people are suddenly, more violent, and not only that, more violent, but now they're even premeditatingly attacking the police, and so they're trying to reason why. But the reality is that it's happening, or not just it's happening, but it's just 6 incidents over 2 years, and it's not to say that it won't happen more, not to say that it's not to say that any of that, but the main takeaway is that that's something that they're actually looking at, or that's actually perturbing them, or that's getting them going. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Or that's keeping them up at night. As opposed to the protests and marches, because the protests and marches were consistent for the last how many years? You know what I'm saying? But it's more so this premeditated attack on police that they are trying to stop. So basically, but long story short, they just want black people to continue to be docile, and not only docile, but to not attack their law enforcement.
Speaking of docile and not wanting to attack their law enforcement, I'm going to ask you about a character who many black folks see as a savior, or saw as a savior, or saw as the greatest thing to ever happen for black people, yet a lot of the things that the FBI has sent up red flags over happened under his watch. Let's talk about Barack Obama, former president of the United States. He never wanted to attack law enforcement himself. What are your thoughts about Obama in regards to this black identity extremist? What do you think? How did he lend a hand, so to speak, to this FBI document?
So one of the interesting things about it is that in 2014, the FBI has a document. Let me look at it. The FBI document is Black Separatist Extremists: An Introduction for Law Enforcement. This was released in January 2014, right? So basically, that tells you that that's Obama's FBI. Obama's FBI is putting out a document on Black separatist extremists, an introduction for law enforcement. And of course, this document right here, this one in August 2017, is Black identity extremists likely motivated to target law enforcement officers. So the reality is that Barack Obama was already looking into Black separatists. You get what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And of course, if you black, a lot of black conscious people are Black separatists.
Right.
So for that matter, Barack Obama's pretty much looking into a lot of the Black conscious community and looking at how to criminalize them. Because again, this is an introduction to law enforcement. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And I remember one time when I was walking in like an African arts fair. Here in Brooklyn, right? Where I'm in Brooklyn, right? So they have this African arts fair, and I'm walking by these police. At that time I was wearing red, black, and green, and with one of my friends or whatever, and the police go, look at that, that's some Al Sharpton shit or something like that. These white boys, start saying, oh, that's some Al Sharpton shit. Yada yada. Now, brother I'm with is, getting irked, and like, how dare you? How dare you talk about, Marcus Garvey flag and some Al Sharpton thing? But I'm telling them, look, let these crackers be confused.
Right.
Let them be confused about what it is. Because real talk, I don't like Al Sharpton neither. I don't like Al Sharpton. That's something in common, right? But it might not even be that they didn't know what the red, black, and green was. They might have just been, because real talk, the other thing I told his brother was that they might have just been baiting this brother,
Right.
to get his reaction.
Yes.
You get what I'm saying?
Yes, of course.
Because and one of the confirmations over here is that this thing has, the black, 2014, the document says an introduction to law enforcement.
Mm-hmm.
So that means law enforcement is getting a document on quote unquote black separatism. Or now they're getting a document on quote unquote black identity extremists.
Mm-hmm.
You get what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
So as to say that law enforcement is being taught and told of what you are, what your ambitions are, what your goals are, what they can research about your history and the history of your movement, what the red, black, and green means, who Al Sharpton is, who Marcus Garvey is, who maybe even Martin Delaney is, and they're getting all that. They have all that information, but they're not letting you know this.
Right.
You get what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
This document right here is a leaked document. They're not letting you know that they're giving it out, and that's another thing to recognize too. I didn't look too deeply into it, but I don't remember anybody talking about this black separatist extremist in Introduction for Law Enforcement. The 2014 document.
Right.
That Obama had.
Right.
You get what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
This document right here about the black identity extremists, it was all over.
Yeah.
You see what I'm saying?
Yes, it was.
So as to say that, even though Barack Obama was doing the same thing, this guy somehow managed to protect the secrets
of white people.
Even though the FBI was looking at you.
Mm-hmm.
You see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
He was keeping the secrets of white people, right? As they were passing around secrets on black people.
Mm-hmm. It's interesting you mentioned that because, and it's interesting you mentioned the story with your friend walking through the African Arts Festival because, it recently came out once again that Sharpton was being paid to keep quiet about different white entities and their racism. And we see a lot of this from certain Negroes of keeping white secrets, oftentimes for pay. And, it's a shame that we cannot get through to a lot of black folks about Obama. Now, I was happy initially to see a black man, rise to where he rose to, but then I started looking at his actions, and his actions were not pro-black in any form. They were more pro-Hispanic, more pro-gay than anything. And more pro-white. I could remember him at the time when the Baltimore riots over Freddie Gray's death were going on. He called the people who were rioting thugs. He didn't call anyone else thugs who were actually thugs, if you get my meaning.
Yeah, of course.
So I'd like to go back to something that we talked about before, and I think it's good that it follows talking about Obama and Sharpton there. You mentioned earlier about the black informant and how there's going to be a rise in the black informant. What do you think are some of the telltale signs of the black informant? Because we all need to be aware of the black informant. We need to be able to identify these folks and kind of get them up out of there early. So what do you think, based on your knowledge, based on your reasoning, based on what you've seen historically in terms of black informants, what are the things we need to look out for in terms of black informants?
And this is the trouble is this, that reality is this, that, matter of fact, let me go to one of these, like I said, in this book, in the Pro-Black Opinion, I have a bunch of, I have some of the rules of warfare, but I want to quote one of them because I use one of these quotes, very often, and in order to teach our people about, basically about war, but also about our history, about us as a people. But these rules of warfare are very important. So, and one of them is this: it says, if you want to see whether any spy has come into the camp during the day, have no one go to his quarters. You know? So this is to say that if you're in a situation of warfare, right? If you are trying to monitor for the spies, you have to make sure, and this was like during like a time before phones and all that.
Mm-hmm.
But you have to be mindful of where these people go, where they are, who they talk to, all that kind of stuff. And the reality is that it's going to be difficult,
Mm-hmm.
you know, because unfortunately the reality is that our people are very sloppy when it comes to our security, our cyber security, or our information.
Mm-hmm.
You know, we are very, very sloppy. You know, and I'm saying that, you know, to mean that, you know, a lot of people, you know, somebody once said that there are a lot of paid informants and unpaid informants.
Right.
You know, that a lot of our people just give away information and details when they shouldn't and where they shouldn't. You know, but that's probably why I personally don't like, you know, people, you know, videotaping me or something like that, because I don't know where they're gonna put it,
Right.
or where they're gonna, you know, put the information. You know, but on that note, it's like, you know, basically these informants are nominally on a mission to get black people to admit to wanting to do something violent. You get what I'm saying? And you know, kind of like in order to entrap black people. You know, so realistically speaking, it's gonna be incredibly difficult, and it's gonna depend on how you go about organizing or trying to organize. But one thing you got to do is you got to keep your eyes open, and when you're keeping your eyes open, you also have to, you know, be circumspect, be suspicious.
Mm-hmm.
You know, one time when I was in this black organization, this one sister came to me and she said, "Look, by the time the fools learn how the game is played, the players have dispersed."
Mm-hmm.
You know,
Mm-hmm.
and that's an African proverb. But the idea is that there's going to be, you know, by the time you learn how the game is played, the players have dispersed. You got to see who is, you know, because a lot of people are going to be playing. There's a game going on. A lot of people are going to be playing you, and I think a good example is like here in Brooklyn, we were trying to do the first black political party, right? It was you know, it was under the leadership of Alton Maddox. You know, they were going to call it the Freedom Party, and I was participating heavy in it. You know,
Mm-hmm.
but there's the, you know, they said what we need to do is we need to have a gubernatorial candidate, and if the governor gets a certain amount of votes, then we would establish a political party, right? So they said, okay, we're gonna run somebody recognizable. He's a city councilman, right? You know, he talks all that radical stuff. You know, we're gonna run Charles Barron.
Oh yeah.
Right?
Mm-hmm.
So we run Charles Barron, and you know, we get like, let's say we need 50,000 votes. Like, I don't remember the exact number because it was like maybe 5 years ago, right?
Okay.
But you know, we need 50,000 votes, right? We get 35,000 signatures, right? Now you need like 15,000 signatures, maybe, right?
Mm-hmm.
But from all over New York, you know, so it's like, I mean, I was working heavy in, you know, New York and, you know, New York City or whatever, but then you also needed signatures from like Albany and you know, Buffalo and all that, and people were going, you know,
Mm-hmm.
other people were going heavy, you know, there's a lot of expense. Let's say we got 35,000 signatures, so you would think with 35,000 signatures you get, you know, over 50,000 votes,
Mm-hmm.
right? But it seemed like we got like 25,000 votes put into the police count, and come to find out that only the gubernatorial candidate could challenge the vote, right? But Charles Barron said he's not going to challenge the vote. Okay, Come to find out, he's working with Sharpton. The other people on his advisory board working with Sharpton, right? And pretty much working with the police. Him too.
Wow.
You know what I'm saying? Nobody knew. I mean, according to and that's when I got disenchanted with the particular organization I was in, because the leader was saying that he kind of like he knew that Charles Brown was no good, but he didn't know he was that bad. You know what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
Like he knew that he might turn, but he didn't know he was turning people away from that much. But the reality is that to this day, black folk, if you hear Charles Barron, like a lot of you hear Charles Barron, you're like, yo, this dude speak. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
But he he's on the police payroll. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So it's like in that capacity, it's like how could you tell? It's like you almost can't. You know what I'm saying?
So with that said, before we wrap this up, I'm going to give you the last words in conclusion. But before we get there, I want to ask you, what are some of the red flags that black people can avoid displaying while still fighting the good fight? So how can we fight? How can we still continue to do the work, but not basically expose ourselves? Or is it even possible to do the work and not expose ourselves, to be labeled as black identity extremists and be on the, say, FBI's radar?
Well, I mean, like there's always different schools of thought. I recently read somebody saying, it's too early to be going underground.
Okay.
Because I don't believe that it's too early, but I mean, some people say it's too early, but who knows why somebody would even say that?
Right.
But the reality is that the way how like I believe it might have been Sekou Toure who said that if the enemy is not doing anything against you, just because you're not doing anything against the enemy,
Right. Mm-hmm.
So it's like the reality is that you're gonna be on this man's list regardless, But I'm gonna go back to this story from my youth, where these gangbangers were walking. Like I was leaving high school, and I saw a group of classmates, So I decided to talk with them and join them, whatever. And then we walking together, and then we see a group of gangbangers, like literal thugs, walking toward us. Now they're trying to bump into us to start a fight with us because we're high schoolers. They were high schoolers too, I guess. Well, they were high school age, and I guess they were interested in robbing a high school student, whatever, right? So, but we dodged them obviously. We're not gonna bump into a bunch of strangers in a gang or whatever. But as I'm walking, I'm joking with I'm just joking around with my group of friends or my group of classmates or whatever. And then one of the dudes in the group just shouts out to me, "You are a stupid nigga." Now, he didn't say nigga or whatever. He said, "You a stupid nigga." Now, when he says this, he's obviously joking or whatever. But he said it at the wrong time because the gangbangers are walking. They're like, "What did you just say?" Turning around,
right.
like we were talking to them. Now, they knew we weren't talking to them, of course, but they were looking to fight with us regardless.
Mm-hmm.
So when this boy said that, he ran. Right?
Mm-hmm.
Like he just ran away, right? Like he just started running, but the group was telling me, stay together, because as long as we're together, they're not going to do anything, right? So we walking slowly away from this group as they're like, "What do you say?" And they're walking toward us and they're cashing up to us, right? And I know this group, these are my classmates, and we're not the closest of friends or whatever. And the boy who ran away seemed to have got away, but I also remember, I'm one of the fastest kids in the school. Right? And on top of that, the boy who's running away ain't that fast. And if I were to run and sprint, I could run past him. So if he got away, I get away too. Because, they say if you could, they say one thing that, if the one way to run away from a bear is to run faster than the person with you. You know what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
So I said to myself, look, I started breaking away from the group, and they singled me out, and then I said, look, I'm just gonna run, and I ran past the other guy, right? No, I ran up to the other guy, and they stopped chasing me. But I don't want to say why they stopped chasing me because that's a little embarrassing. But they stopped chasing me, and they said, and then I asked the dude. I said, later on, the group of friends staying back, one of them got robbed as they tried to hide in the store, and they all walked out one at a time, and they robbed the last person, whatever, right?
Mm-hmm.
But I didn't get robbed. Me and the guy who ran away didn't get robbed.
Right.
And part of the reason, and I asked the dude who ran away, I said, why'd you run? And he said, look, if somebody wants money from me, they got to work for it.
Right.
And that's something that I remembered, moving forward. And so it's like, the reality is that these white folk are going to have you on their list.
Mm-hmm.
Okay? They're going to have you, they're going to be looking into, they're going to be looking through your records. But one of the things that you should do most importantly, I think, is make them work for it.
Yes.
You see what I'm saying? Make them work for it. If they want that, if they want to know all your stuff, and they want to kick down your door, and they want to blah blah blah, let them work for it.
Makes sense. Yeah.
You get what I'm saying? Because the reality is that you are fighting for something that's right and just.
Mm-hmm.
You see what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm. So
you're supposed to be doing that. But if they're fighting against you because they're fighting because like I said, when it comes to like with St. Augustine, with who they call St. Augustine, they have some sort of peace to keep. That's why they have a war with you. You get what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So their peace is keeping. They want their vision of peace is what we have right now, what you're fighting against. So they're going to war with you for that, sure, but let them work for it. You get what I'm saying?
Yeah.
But yeah. Sorry.
Let's pause for a station ID, and on the other side, you're going to give us your final word. I'm going to give you the time that you need for the final conclusion. Okay? Hold on 1 second.
You are listening to the Bitter Medicine Podcast on KWAC Radio.
Welcome back to the podcast. Today we're talking to Oni, the guest blogger on www.bittermedicineblogs.com. He wrote an article on the FBI's report about black identity extremists. And Oni, we want to give you the final word about this article and any thoughts you have about the black community going forward.
Yeah, so, realistically speaking, what I want to say is, black people, we have to recognize that we're at war, right? We have to recognize that the FBI and other institutions here in America are there to keep you docile, keep you exploited, keep you robbed, keep you from your own sovereignty, I was having an interesting, some white boy was writing something online about how China kills its citizens and whatnot, and one thing that and how America might allow for more dissidents, if you will, but one thing that I had to clarify about that issue is this idea that this dissidence that America quote unquote allows is only because America has some economical benefit from keeping black people alive, particularly docile black people. Mm-hmm. Because, like they said, the 13th Amendment could allow for the enslavement of African people. So in that regard, it's like black people, we have to realize that they are just there to keep us docile, to keep us from fighting, from standing up. And to do that, they are keeping us away from our racial pride, our self-esteem, our knowledge of self, our independent institutions, our independence, our sovereignty, and we have in our hands, tools to get us more informed. Like for instance, books that were written, but also have a need to organize and make our dreams a reality. Because again, nobody else is going to do that for us.
Mm-hmm.
You know, no one else is going to do that for us, and they are fighting to keep us in the position that we are in right now.
Mm-hmm.
You know, they want to always be dominant, and they want us to always be submissive. But whether or not a person knows themselves, they should not accept the position of submission.
Right.
But if they don't know themselves, again, I have books for that. If you want to know what a strong black person looks like, pick up Zubiri and the Maroons of Ma'ah. If you want to know more of your history, of your past, of your present, of what a potential future can look like for you, pick up the Pro-Black Compendium. You know? And I want to emphasize, pick them up on Create Space in particular. But on that note, I do want to say that is where we are as a people. You know, we need to get informed. We need to get information, and we need to get in formation.
Excellent.
You know?
Oni, before we go, tell the people where they can find you on social media, etc.
Okay, on social media, you have to look up Onitaset, Onitaset. Look up that name, and you'll find my Tumblr, my Twitter, even my WordPress. And for email, you could email me at africanbloodsibs@aim.com.
Great. So, listeners, remember, Oni is going to have his own show on the KWAZ radio network, where you will be able to ask him anything. He just gave you the email address where you can send your emails, etc. There'll be more info forthcoming about that show. You'll be able to see that on our Facebook page, at the Bitter Medicine Show on Facebook. Oni, thanks a bunch for being on the show to discuss your article, your recent blog. We hope to have you on again very soon, even though you're going to be doing your own show soon. Thank you again, and until next time, listeners, this has been the Bitter Medicine Podcast.
Thanks for listening to the Bitter Medicine Podcast with your host, Koku. If you like what you just heard, we hope you pass along our web address, bittermedicineblogs.com, to your friends and colleagues, and share our show to all your social media. Be sure to check out our archive section on our website for previous podcasts. This has been a KWAZ radio production. Join us next time for another session of the Bitter Medicine Podcast. Follow us on Facebook at Bitter Medicine Show, Twitter, Bitter Meds, Tumblr, Bitter Meds, Instagram, Bitter Medicine.